Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor delivered his budget reply at the National Press Club this afternoon. He used the speech to accuse the Treasurer of missing an opportunity to cut spending in his first budget.
Deficits are now forecast to grow higher over that period, rising from $32 billion in the 21-22 final budget outcome to $51.3 billion in 24-25. Deficits going up over that time period. But what's most alarming is that the government's own fiscal strategy actually abandons the goal to return the budget to balance. It abandons that goal.
Let's get some analysis now. Phil Coorey is with me. He's political editor at the Australian Financial Review. What did you make of Angus Taylor at the Press Club? He was certainly quite indignant when it comes to those stage 3 tax cuts.
Yes, look, it was a bit like the budget. You know, it was just sort of setting the scene. You know, for the next 2.5 years about sort of how the coalition's going to sort of approach the economy. And I think the standout bit of the speech, I guess, was Taylor declaring those stage 3 tax cuts. Well, not just stage 3, but tax in general, as the clear line of difference between the Labor and the coalition over the next 3 years. He said the biggest marker of values, a term like that, will be tax. So where Labor's looking at raising taxes, the Libs, he's saying we're looking at growing the economy, which is how they got the budget back to balance before COVID struck. They did it without increasing taxes. So it's a pretty clear delineation. I thought that probably stood out as much as anything, and there was a fair bit there on energy as well. Gave it to Matt Keane, gave him one up the bracket, because remember Matt, we've sort of had the sort of breathlessness of Dan Andrews earlier this week, saying we need more gas. This is the bloke who's refused to allow any gas to be developed in his state for over 10 years, conventional gas. And then we've had Matt Keane, who only a few years ago was saying, was prepared to open the Narrabri gas field as part of a deal with Taylor when he was Energy Minister, now demanding other states send New South Wales gas as part of a reserve. So, Angus Taylor didn't use the word hypocrite, but, that's what he was saying.
Rod Sims, in your paper today, and then reiterated on this program this afternoon, he's the former ACCC chair. He's saying it can be quite quickly resolved, this issue. He said what you've got to do essentially is make that trigger compulsory and also essentially bring on more supply with the threat of export controls. The government doesn't have to use those.
No.
But then the producers will crank up supply and reduce price. That's his view. Yeah,
well, that's sort of how it worked previously. Like the Morrison government, there was the Turnbull government introduced the gas trigger, but it didn't have a price point in it. Like it would only get triggered. The gas companies had to ensure adequate supply, and if there wasn't adequate supply, they'd threaten to pull this trigger, and the gas companies would just react and just make sure kick more gas down the line. And that would sort of keep downward pressure on prices. The trouble with this time is we're in the middle of the war, with the Ukraine and stuff like that. So that's just driving the price up so much. But what Rod Sims is saying is right to a point. But that gas trigger would be a lot more effective if it actually had a price trigger in it. So if gas hit a certain price, then they'd be threatened with export controls. But all these things are interventionist, KG. They bring sovereign risk elements with them. And I think everyone agrees the easiest way is just get more of this stuff out of the ground. It's sitting there. It's not going to cure the short-term problem. But, Malcolm Turnbull was making this point in 2017, and had we, followed through then, we wouldn't be having this argument now, because we'd be getting more gas out of either New South Wales or Victoria.
Government sources, certainly senior sources, have told me that one of the things that's delaying this response immediately is just checking all the legal ramifications of an intervention like this, because there's every chance that one of the big producers, or all of them, seek to challenge it. So you've got to make sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed.
Yeah, look, I don't know what they're planning, so it's hard to sort of comment on that. I mean, if they're just planning on pulling the gas trigger, I assume that's already been covered off in a legal sense. But if they're thinking of going further with price caps and stuff like that, absolutely, you probably get yourself into all sorts of trouble. So, it sounds like prudent, but yeah.
But in a political sense, there's a huge amount of stake, obviously, with rates rising, and if the prices were to eventuate as suggested in the budget paper number 1, then that'd be diabolical for the government.
Mate, nothing kills governments like cost of living, and history has shown that. And new governments, old governments, mid-term governments, and you just see this perfect storm at the moment of energy prices and interest rates, and high inflation. It's just shocking, and and energy prices. Like, not everyone has a mortgage, but everyone uses electricity, and everyone uses energy. So it's massive. It's a massive problem. But their options are limited. This is one of the problems when you privatise the energy sector. You're still accountable for it, but your ability to do something about it is much less. And we're seeing all sorts of responses, including Dan Andrews now, sort of going back towards state ownership, and I think we'll see more of that.
Phil Coorey, political editor at the Australian Financial Review. Thanks as always.
No worries, mate.